Hey, good afternoon, everyone. With feed costs making up to 65 to 70% of a typical farm's budget, there is growing demand on how to make every dollar count. Sask Pork Spring webinar series returns today with how to save money in your hog operation with Dr. Dan Sotto with Western Ag Supply. My name is Ravneet Kaur. I manage producer services at Sask Pork, and I will be moderating today's session. Before I introduce today's speaker, a few housekeeping announcements. Please keep yourself on mute during the presentation. You can ask questions at the end by either raising your hand and unmuting yourself or typing it in the chat box at the bottom of your screen. Without further ado, allow me to introduce Dr. Dan Sotto. Dan completed his PhD at the University of Saskatchewan and trained at Prairie Swine Center with Dr. Denise Beaulieu. He has also been a familiar face for many in Saskatchewan, including volunteering for Sask Pork at Ag in the City. Dan now works with pig producers in Saskatchewan, Alberta, and Montana, providing animal nutrition and barn management advice with overall objective of managing their feed cost per pig and improving overall performance and profitability. We are excited to have you with us today, Dan. The floor is all yours.
Okay, so thank you for that introduction, Ravneet, and it's a pleasure to be here and talk to you today about how to save money in your hog operations with the focus on feeds and feeding. Hang on, let me just share my presentation. Okay, so in order for producers to become more profitable, we need to manage input costs. And because feed constitutes up to 70% of variable costs, any strategy to reduce feed costs and improve feed efficiency can reduce feed cost per pig and improve profitability. So this presentation will focus on feeds and feeding. And we have identified some strategies to reduce feed costs and feed costs per pig. And these include ingredient selection, setting purchasing specifications or quality specifications to buy ingredients with the quality that we desire and to ensure consistent pig performance. We're also going to talk about opportunity ingredients to reduce feed cost. We'll also talk about ingredient processing, specifically grinding or particle size reduction and its effect on feed conversion. We'll be talking about gestation sow feeding and feeding according to body condition of the sows, and feeder or feeding management, looking into feeding sows accurately and managing feed wastage. So the first strategy we'll talk about is ingredient selection. Having a set of purchasing or quality specs for ingredients ensure that you get what you paid for. And if you have these in your purchasing contracts, it's easier to ask for price adjustments if actual product deviates from what is expected. The opportunity or alternative ingredients help reduce feed costs without affecting pig performance. Western Canadian diets typically use wheat and barley as energy source and soybean meal as a protein source. There are other ingredients that are available in Canada that can supply the energy and protein in the diet. In addition, co-products from grain milling, brewing, distilling can be used in pig feed and reduce cost without compromising performance. So, for example, on grains, below is a table of grains that may be used as an energy source in pig diets and recommended specifications. So, as earlier mentioned, wheat and barley are the typical grains used. And but when available and the price is attractive, hulless barley, rye, triticale, and corn may also be used. So we monitor bushel weights, as this is an indicator of the concentration of nutrients in the grain. And we also monitor uh, moisture content, as this is important in maintaining the quality of the grains during prolonged storage. We also want as little contamination as possible from foreign materials and mycotoxins. For protein sources, in addition to soybean meal, extruded soy, regular canola meal, high-fat canola meal, corn DDGs and wheat DDGs may also be used as a protein source. And again, we monitor moisture content, as this affects the shelf life of the ingredient. We also look at the crude protein levels and make sure they are within acceptable range. As you can see here, soybean meal has the highest crude protein, 45 to 49%, whereas the other ingredients range from 26 to 42%. It is also important to note that the fat content, especially of extruded soy, high-fat canola, and corn DDGs. So pulses like peas, lentils, and faba beans may be a protein source as well and can replace soybean meal. So as with the grains, it is important to look at bushel weights, moisture content, and contamination from other coarse grains and foreign materials. So overall, it is important to have a set of purchasing or quality specs in order to maintain the quality of feed and to maintain consistent animal performance. So moving on to opportunity ingredients, peas and fabas can be used as an alternative to soy. And in the market, what's available would be green and yellow peas. They have the same nutritive value. Okay, so I deleted the picture of the piece. It's okay. We want a low tannin and antitrypsin activity. Typically, if it comes from white flour varieties, it's a low tannin piece. If chickpeas are available, the kabuli variety is what we want. So for faba beans, again, same as peas, we want a low tannin and low antitrypsin activity varieties. And we have identified them as Snowbird, Cresta, Snowdrop, Imposa, and Tabasco. Compared to soybean meal, peas and fabas are about 50% lower in crude protein. They have lower fat compared to soy, but they have higher starch content compared to soy. Overall, net energy of fabas and field peas are higher than soy. However, their digestible lysine levels are lower compared to soy. So most farms use peas at a maximum of rate of 15%, and they usually cite that using too much peas or fabas results in backing and pigs backing off feed. But in our case, we rarely observe this, and our recommended inclusion rate is about 5% from 8 to 12 kgs of pigs. 12 to 18, we can increase it to about 15%, and 18 kgs up to market, we can increase it up to 25 to 30% as well. So assuming ingredient price for a wheat, soy, and barley diet, and assuming a price of peas and fabas at $440 per metric ton, in a diet for 45 to 60 kilogram pig with an NE of 2.4 megacalories and SID lysine to NE ratio of about 4.25, we estimate the savings of about $45 per metric tons when peas are used, and similarly, about $36 per metric tons savings when fabas are used. On distillers dry grains, DDGs, corn DDGs to be specific, is a co-product of ethanol production. It is high in energy with moderate crude protein. Digestible lysine is low, and available phosphorus is high. So we recommend not more than 5% of the first week post-weaning, then increase 10% the following week. Week 3, increase to 15 to 30% depending on the savings. So for growing finishing pigs, the typical inclusion is up to 20%. However, trials have shown up to 30% DDGs without negative impact on growth performance. Lower levels in the finishers are recommended to address issues on fat firmness. So for sows and boars, in lactation sows, can use up to 20%, gestation sows up to 40%, and boars up to 40%. So according to NRC, corn DDGs has a crude protein of 27%, and an NE of about 2343, higher than soy, and this can be attributed to the higher starch and fat content. Digestible lysine is low at 0.55 compared to 2.63 of soy. I calculated the savings with the use of DDGS and wheat-based diets, and using these prices and using a wheat-based diet for 45 to 60 kilogram pigs, and again targeting an NE of 2.4 and an SID lysine to NE ratio of 4.25. At $435 per metric ton, we estimate a savings of about $6 per metric ton of feed. So firmness of fat is often a concern when using corn DDGs because of the high unsaturated fatty acids in the oil. To avoid soft bellies, diets need to be formulated considering the iodine value of ingredients. So iodine value gives us an estimate of the concentration of unsaturated fatty acids. So if controlled, it can avoid soft bellies even when using DDGS. So with us, we formulate iodine value of about 40 to 60 MEQ. We also need to look at the mycotoxin levels. Cautionary levels for aflatoxin is about 0.2 ppm. Vomitoxin about at 5 ppm, zearalenone is at 3 ppm. So this is unfinished feed, so I can just work it backwards at what level should DDGs have, assuming a 20% or whatever inclusion rate you want to use. Meal run is a co-product of flour extraction. It is a high fiber ingredient with high amounts of residual starch. We need to consider mycotoxin load as well, because sometimes wheat screenings are returned to the mill run. Commercially, it is available in meal or pellet format. The format is important to consider because it impacts hauling costs and storage capacity of the bins. So this can be strategically used in sow diets and also in grow fin diets with back fat issues. As per NRC, the meal run or wheat shorts would have crude protein close to 16%, and neutral detergent fiber is high, roughly 30%. There's high amounts of residual as well, as previously mentioned, and the net energy is low, and as well as digestible lysine. So using a dry sow formula to illustrate potential savings, assuming these ingredients here, and a price of about $320 per metric ton for meal run, we estimate a savings of $17 per metric ton of feed. So there may be other opportunity ingredients out there, so it's very important to look around and ask different industries for their co-products. And it's important to talk to your nutritionist to see if these ingredients would fit your feeding program. A common limitation to using opportunity ingredients is the availability of bins. So therefore, it will be advantageous if there are opportunity bins, or if we could add opportunity bins on farm. However, to put up opportunity bins, we need to consider capital cost, the type of bin and the capacity, and also steepness of the cone. For example, if you're using mill run, the meal type is not very flowable, so you'll need a very steep cone. It would also be advantageous if there's an option for the opportunity bin to run straight into the mixer or pass through the grinder. Having enough micro bins also allows you to be flexible and respond to ingredient price changes, availability of new ingredients, and new nutritional advances like new amino acids and other additives. It also allows you to respond to environmental concerns, like, for example, reducing zinc in the diet and having to replace it with other alternative ingredients to compensate for its removal. Also, looking into phosphorus excretion, having more microboxes allow you to use technologies like phytases. Health and genetic changes. So, for example, you need to use medication, or you need to again need more amino acid to meet the nutrient requirements of new genetics or genetic. So now we move on ingredient processing, looking at grinding or particle size reduction. Grinding or particle size reduction improves animal performance in all stages of pig production, and the improvements are typically attributed to increased surface area, which allows for better access of the digestive enzymes. As a rule of thumb, for every 100 micron decrease in particle size, feed conversion improves by about 1.3% in growth finishing pigs. However, grinding too finely has no growth advantage and may have negative consequences on feed flow, and also predisposes pigs to gastric ulcers. So additionally, grinding improves handling and mixing characteristics of feed, and the reduction in particle size variation minimizes feed separation. As earlier mentioned, grinding too finely has negative consequences. For example, meal efficiency goes down because grinding, it takes longer to grind grains too finely. Fine feed does not blow very well, and so there will be higher incidence of bridging and out of feed events. Also, fine feeds are dusty, and so it might irritate the pigs. And finely ground feed, as earlier mentioned, predisposes pigs to gastric ulcers. In a recent study by Kiepert and al., they conducted a meta-analysis of 11 nursery studies published from 1986 to 2016. And they reported improvement in average daily gain as particle size was reduced, but not below 500 to 600 microns. Average daily feed intake was decreased as particle size was reduced, and feed conversion ratio was improved as particle size was reduced. The same group conducted a meta-analysis for 18 grower finisher studies published from 1986 to 2016, and they reported improvements in average daily gain as particle size was reduced, but not below 500 to 600 microns. Average daily feed intake was decreased as particle size was reduced, and feed conversion ratio was improved as particle size was reduced. So it appears that for both nursery and growing finishing pigs, there's no growth advantage to grinding below 500 to 600 microns. So in the same study, Kippert et al. Reported increasing ulceration and keratinization scores in the stomach as particle size was reduced. So a quick and dirty calculation on the savings due to grinding, assuming the current particle size is 850 microns with a feed conversion of say 2.9. Reducing the particle size to 550 microns may improve feed conversion FCR to 2.787. With a live weight of 125, that would be equivalent to about 14.2 kilogram reduction in total feed consumed. With an average feed cost of say $440 per metric ton, there is a potential savings of $6.2 per pig. And if you're shipping a little over 8,000 pigs per year, that's 50,000 a year savings. So in 2016, we conducted a study looking at the grinding cost of reducing particle size from 850 to 550 microns. We estimate a 68% increase in grinding cost per metric ton. At that time, it was equivalent to about $34 per ton increase. 34 cents increase per metric ton. So moving on to gestation sow and feeding according to body condition. On gestating sow feeding, we can divide this into early gestation, mid gestation, and late gestation. And the goal is to prevent fluctuation in body condition before farrowing, weaning, and next farrowing. Typically, the producers give the sows a lot of feed during early gestation, and this should be okay. However, the sows are often given more feed than they require during mid gestation, so sows and late gestation. So sows are overconditioned coming into farrowing. So during early gestation, we want to avoid hard restrictions on feed, as higher feed allowance increases embryo survival and total born. In a study by Thorne et al., having higher feed intake during early pregnancy resulted in higher concentrations of progesterone, and this is a hormone for maintaining pregnancy. They also reported higher embryo survival. Same manner, Laganic et al. Reported higher total born when sows had a higher feed allowance compared to those who are feed restricted. During mid-gestation, we do not want to overfeed sows to prevent them from getting over-conditioned. So the fat sows coming into farrowing results in higher stillborn rates, low sow feed intake during lactation, higher weight loss, and low milk production, among other problems that you would see here. And consequently, piglet growth is compromised and return to estrus is compromised as well. So in a study by Kim et al., sows with a back fat of higher than 14 millimeters result into lower lactation feed intake compared to sows with 14 millimeters and below. Overall, they reported that for every 1 millimeter increase in back fat at end of gestation, feed intake and lactation is reduced by 60 to 120 grams per day, and sows lose about 1.3 kilogram of weight after lactation and 0.25 millimeters after lactation. During late gestation, again, it's still necessary to avoid overfeeding. There is evidence that sows that shows that bump feeding by over a kilogram or increasing caloric intake results in higher stillborns, as shown by Malman et al. And in a study by Gonzalez et al., they reported that pump feeding may reduce piglet birth weight and increase stillborn rate by 2%. So in order to properly feed sows in gestation, we need to correctly assess how the sow body condition. A lot of times, the body condition assessment is done by visual or eyeballing, by touching the spine and the ribs, and this is not very accurate. The most accurate would be to weigh them, but we do consider this to be very tedious. So other ways would be to estimate the body weight using a flank tape. However, this is only about 80% accurate. Measuring back fat by a meter is hard to do and is very prone to error. The method that we highly recommend is using the sow caliper. It is very easy and tells you outright if the sows are thin, ideal, or fat. So overall, our recommendation, regardless of body condition, sows should be flushed with feed from weaning until they are bred, and then assess the body condition, then adjust the feed accordingly. So assuming you have a 2.25 megacal gestation diet per kg gestation diet, sows in ideal body condition should get roughly 2.2 kilograms of feed per day. If they are thin, I would give them more, possibly up to 3.2 kilograms per sow per day, with the end goal of reaching the ideal state by day 30. By day 30, the expectation is that the sows are in ideal condition and should be fed about 2.2 kilograms of feed per day until day 90. And then you may bump up by half a kg to 0.7 kgs per sow per day. So assuming the current feed consumption per gestating sow is around 3 kg, which is normally what we see. And you're able to cut it down to about 2.5 kilograms per sow per day. It has a potential savings of $18 per sow. For a 400 sow barn operation, that translates to about a potential savings of $17,000 per year. Okay, so another strategy to manage feed cost is feeding the sows accurately and managing feed wastage. We need to have a good estimate of how much feed we are giving the sows to avoid over and under feeding. So if sows are being fed with scoops, we need to know the exact weight of the feed that it can actually deliver. And similarly, we need to make sure that the feed drop weights are close to the settings in our feeder box. So it is recommended to look into this every quarter because the density of the feed might change as well, especially if you're changing grains. So feed wastage can be minimized by managing the feeder settings. It is recommended, the recommended is 60 to 70% pan coverage 1 to 3 days after weaning, then reduce it to 40 to 50% pan coverage. After the first market cut, we can reduce it further to 35 to 40% because there's fewer pigs in there anyway. Having the feeders too open is not beneficial for growth, and pigs tend to waste feed. Consequently, having the feeders too tight affects feed intake and growth. 40 to 50% pan coverage looks like this for mash and pellet, and is what we desire. And after a first pull of market pigs, you may adjust the feeders to 35 to 40% pan coverage, and this is how it will look like for meal and pellet. So in summary, buying the right ingredients and having flexibility on ingredient use and the ability to use opportunity ingredients may reduce feed costs. Reducing particle size may improve feed conversion, consequently reducing feed costs per pig. Feeding gestation sows according to body condition may also reduce your feed cost with additional benefit of performance additional benefits of improvement in performance. Reducing feed wastage in any department in your operations will result in feed cost savings. So at this point, I'd like to acknowledge Sask Pork for inviting us to speak to you today. Like to thank my fellow nutritionists here at Western Ag Supply who helped me build this presentation, Joaquin Sanchez and Benjamin Londono. And thank you everybody for your time. And let me know if you have questions.
Very informative presentation, Dan. Thank you. So let's see if we have any questions for our presenter today. You can unmute yourself and ask a question, or you can use the chat box.
I should maybe put my email address here, so in case they want to just send me their questions.
For sure.
I've got a question to lead off here, Dan. So, I mean, the savings for utilizing peas in the diet are pretty big, and it's one of the, one of the best things it looks like you can do on reducing feed costs. The question I had was around pea starch, and I know some of these pea processing plants are starting up, and there's some research going on how to use that pea starch. Are you seeing that on the market yet? And is it a viable ingredient to use, or is it just still too challenging before we figure out how to process it?
Okay, so like right now, feed prices are high. So we're kind of like desperate to reduce feed costs. So I've seen this in some of the barns, and we've used this in some of the barns. In terms of usage, we cannot use too much because it's too fine and it affects the flowability of the feed. I guess it depends on the combination of ingredients. Typically, we use, say, up to 100 kgs per ton. And then we look at the flowability of the feed, maybe reduce it to 75 or 50 kgs per ton if it's really affecting flow.
Okay. Do you know how it's being priced right now as an ingredient, like compared with full seed peas?
Oh, it depends on I think it's close to, okay, so don't quote me on this. I'm guessing it's close to about $500 to $600 per ton.
Okay. Thanks.
Yeah.
I have a follow-up on that, Dan, and one other question. First, great presentation, thank you. My first initial question or follow-up kind of on the pea starch. I know both pea and Fabas starch are really popular right now. Where you are using it, are you having issues on the manufacturing side getting it out of the bin, or are you using it in tote stations? Do you know?
On the pea starch, again, it depends on the bins. So if the bins are steep, then it flows really well. If not, then it's kind of a problem. The pea starch, I know it flows really well into the auger and into the mixer. The Fabas, I know one customer complained that like it drops like a block. And so that kind of screws up your inclusion rate. So like, for example, you're targeting just 25 kgs because of the way they flow like a block. It's hard to get it into your mixer like accurately.
Mm-hmm. Okay. And do you know if there's anyone out there currently pelleting it in a large capacity that you can then further grind it at location?
Fabas starch, I don't know, but I've heard of pea starch and pea flour being pelleted.
Yeah, okay. And then my other question was just in regards to DDGs. So you mentioned 30% and even up to 40% inclusion in some of the sow diets. Is there not large concern surrounding that with mycotoxin concentrations?
That's the thing. If you're going to use it at high levels, you really need to monitor the mycotoxin level.
Yeah.
So if for example you buy DDGs and then it's very high in mycotoxins, or even there's mycotoxin in it, I wouldn't advise to use it in sow diets and piglet diets as well.
Yeah.
So I would strategically use it in growing finishing feed.
Perfect, thank you.
Thanks, Dakota.
Any other questions for Dan?
How about canola meal? What's your recommendation on using canola meal in your diets?
Oh, canola meal. Like technically, there's literature out there that you can use up to 150 kgs per ton. And the growers and the finishers, I think there's newer studies showing that you can do up to 200 kgs per ton. But I mean, this will all be relative to the price of the other protein sources as well. Typically now, in the hut-right colonies that we've worked with, the maximum usage would be around 100 kgs per ton, or 10%.
Thanks, Dan. Any other questions?
Hi there. I have an unrelated question, not in regards to feed, but Mr. Sotto, do you supply or provide additional information on savings opportunities outside of feed, like the 30%, I guess you could say? Like, does your organization involve itself in those other savings opportunities as well? Or are you strictly focused on feed?
For now, it's just focused on feed, but we do have like savings opportunities, or like we have identified some other savings opportunities for the other 30%. It's just that I'm focusing on feed at the moment.
I see. Okay, well, maybe I'll send you an email separately about heating specifically. So thank you for your time.
Oh, sounds good. Thanks.
Dan, we had a comment in our chat box here, like, would you be able to share a copy of your presentation with our listeners today?
Yeah, for sure. I can send it to you. And I thought, like, I was talking with
Lynn?
I think you're going to post this
Yeah.
in YouTube, if I'm not mistaken.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, just wanted to make sure.
Sure.
Any other questions? Maybe. Okay, we have a comment from Dakota. Yes, I have some Fabas starch, and especially with humidity, I can imagine flowability being difficult. I think this goes back to another comment, which was by one of the other producers. They said a sample of pea starch that they had, and you could make a ball with it if you grabbed a handful. So cannot imagine it flowing out of any bin. Is that what you usually see with pea starch, Dan?
I can see that happening, but I think with our experience, what happens is like initially it doesn't flow really well, but once it starts flowing, it flows, it drops from the bin really well. That's the feedback that I get from my customer that uses it.
Okay, thanks. One more time. Any other questions? Okay, so I don't see any questions. So I would just like to remind our audience today that today's session will be available at Sask Pork's YouTube channel by Monday. Also, if you've missed the first webinar in our spring series, Practical Pig Handling and Animal Care Tips and Tricks with Mara Rositas, it's already available on our channel. So just stay tuned on our website and social channels for the final one in our webinar series. With that, I would like to thank Dan and all our attendees for joining today's session. Thank you so much and have a great rest of your day. Thank you.